friends, in our previous videos we have discussed the descriptive studies, analytical studies, and now today's topic is experimental studies. Experimental studies are also known as longitudinal studies because we are following up a population. We are researching that population again after intervening. That means either we are introducing a drug, or we are introducing a change of lifestyle, or we are performing some therapy. So because we are intervening, so these studies are also known as interventional studies. These studies are randomized controlled trials, field trials. Field trials, for example, they are going on nowadays. For corona vaccination, they are being performed on healthy individuals. They are field trials. Community trials, when we are introducing some intervention at community level. For example, if in a community caries index is very high and we introduce community water fluoridation program, and after a stipulated period of time we again evaluate that population to know the caries index and to know the efficacy of the intervention, those are known as community trials. Let's know the aim of experimental epidemiology. In descriptive and analytical epidemiology, we came to know the association about exposure and the disease in question. But with the help of experimental studies, we'll be able to know the scientific proof of etiological factors. That means after the study, we will be able to have a cause and effect relationship between the exposure and the disease in question, or we'll be able to negate this association. Second step is because the ultimate aim of epidemiology is the control of the disease, so we can use these experimental studies to measure the effectiveness and efficiency of preventive and curative regimes. Let's understand these aims with the help of two examples. For example, we have a population of diabetic patients who are suffering from periodontitis. We want to know the cause and effect relationship between periodontal disease and diabetic status. We want to know whether periodontal disease affects glycemic status of the individual or not. So in this population, we will randomly divide this population into two groups. In one group, periodontal therapy will be performed. In the other group, there will be no periodontal therapy. And after a fixed period of time, we will evaluate this population again, and we will see that whether performing the periodontal therapy had any effect on the glycemic status of the individual. If we have got some effect on some improvement in the glycemic status in the periodontal therapy patients, we will say that there is a cause and effect relationship between periodontal disease and diabetes, because by removing the periodontal disease, that means by removing the cause, we could be able to see the effect. That is, we were able to see the improvement in the glycemic status. And for controlling the disease, to apply preventive and curative regimes, we can have an example of, if we have two groups of periodontal patients, in one group we give scaling root planing, and along with that we introduce chlorhexidine mouthwash, and in the other group we do only mechanical therapy, that is scaling and root planing. And after 6 months, if we evaluate the periodontal parameters, then we'll be able to know that whether the addition of chlorhexidine had some effect on the improvement of periodontal parameters or not. So that means, can it be used as a preventive or curative agent in the control of periodontal disease? This can be established by using experimental studies. Mainly clinical trials are of two types. Randomized controlled trials, they are scientifically more accurate, they have more weightage, and non-randomized controlled trials where we are performing trials but patients are not selected randomly in the test and control group. Coming to the randomized controlled trials, there are various steps. First of all, we have to set a protocol, like what kind of patients will be selected, what will be the intervention, what will be the follow-up period, then what are the parameters which we will study. So all those things, and then the patients will be selected by taking informed consent, they have to be informed. All those settings, they come under protocol setting, which is the first step. Then we select the population based on certain inclusion and exclusion criteria. Like in periodontitis, diabetic periodontitis patients, Inclusion criteria will be the patient should be poorly controlled diabetic and patient should be having periodontal disease, or we can select the age group of the patient also. But exclusion will be like, for example, patient if has other comorbidities like cardiovascular disease, or if the patient is pregnant, then they will be excluded from the study. Then we divide this study population into test group and control group. In the test group, intervention will be done. In the control group, whether a placebo is given or no intervention is done, and this is done by the randomization. And by random allocation of the patient, now we have two groups, test group and control group. And here we are giving intervention, here we are giving any placebo, the drug which does not have any active effect, or we are not doing any special therapy. And here we are doing the therapy which we want to evaluate. And then after some period of time which we have fixed for this study, we compare the outcomes. So randomized controlled trials, there are three words. So randomization, we have already discussed that by coin toss method or lottery method, the population is divided into test and control group. That means every patient has equal chance of getting selected as a test group patient or control group patient. Then we have a control because they are the same population, age and sex match population, but we are not intervening in this population, or we are giving placebo. So there is a proper control, and then we are intervening. That is why they are trials. So the name is randomized controlled trials. They have merits, like it's a very sophisticated approach. Everything is set up, everything is planned. It has a high degree of comparability because we have a very good age and sex match population as a control group. So we can easily compare the result of test group and control group. And it eliminates selection bias because the patients have been selected randomly. There are certain demerits also because we are following up so many protocols and we are following up the patients again. So it's expensive, it is of long duration, and during the follow-up certain cases will be lost. They may migrate, or they may lose interest in the study. There might be loss of cases, or they may develop some other disease for which we have to exclude them from the study. And this is not suitable for rare diseases because we have to follow them up. So we will take common diseases. The main disadvantage is being unethical. It becomes sometimes unethical to give test group a therapy which we feel, which we have already come to know through the analytical study that there is some association. So we are depriving the control group of that therapy. So sometimes it becomes unethical. Let's understand it with the example of one very important study which was done on HIV patient when zidovudine was introduced as a drug. So they divided HIV patients into two groups. In one, zidovudine was given. In the other, zidovudine was not given. So after 1 or 2 months, they came to know that zidovudine is becoming very effective in these patients. So it became unethical on their part to continue the study. So they aborted the study there only, and control group was also started with zidovudine. So sometimes it becomes unethical, and we cannot have the proper RCT, and if we have RCT, then we are depriving the control group of the therapy. This is very important for all of us to know what is the scientific evidence hierarchy. That means if we study some research, if we come across some research, whether how much trust we should give, weightage we should give to that study, how much the result of those studies can be applied to the general population. For that, there is a hierarchy, which is a scientific evidence hierarchy. We all know that whenever we find a case in our clinic, we do some experiment, that experiment gets successful, and if we publish that, it will become case report. And if we do it on series of patients and then we publish, it becomes case series. But because there is no control group, there is no protocol, so they lie very low in the hierarchy. So that means the results which have got might be by chance only because that study was not properly planned, control group was not introduced. So we don't know that whether that was a predictable outcome or not. And above the case reports come descriptive studies where we do the observations, we plan, but we get just a clue about the etiological relationship between exposure and disease. Then based on the findings of descriptive studies, we do case control and cohort studies. They lie slightly higher in the hierarchy because here we have control groups. But because they are the observational studies, we are not doing any intervention. So they also are not considered very good in the scientific hierarchy. Best which are being considered are the randomized control trials. We have already discussed them in detail. And based on these randomized control trials, systematic reviews and meta-analysis are conducted. Systematic reviews are basically, they collect all the randomized control trials and then they, based on the findings of those randomized control trials, they have a conclusion. So they just review the randomized control trials which are available. In meta-analysis, they review and then they use the data. They compile the data of all the randomized control trials which are available on that topic and they do statistical analysis again. So meta-analysis is the analysis of analyses. So this is a very accurate method, or these lie on the highest platform on the pyramid. So they provide us with the highest level of scientific evidence, but we have to make sure that this systematic review and meta-analysis are done on a topic, on a study which have considerable number of randomized control trials. If we have only 1 or 2 randomized control trials, the scientific evidence will be less. Thank you. If you have any question, you can put it in the comment box.